Hi, my name's Lukas Pearse. I'm the artistic director of the Upstream Music Association, and thanks for joining us here as part of the Open Waters 2020 Festival of New and Improvised Music, coming to you from, well, at least I'm in Halifax, Chipuktuk in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded home of the Mi'kmaq people with whom we strive to have peace and friendship and good relations. Today, you have joined us for the Six Strings Start Talking version of the Improv Talkback series, which has been a regular fixture of this festival for about 6 years, and it's supported by the International Institute for Critical Studies in Improvisation, a research institute associated with the Guelph Jazz Festival. And I have with me today some fascinating and eager participants, I hope. Yeah, you can maybe not see their names in the streamed version, but I will tell you their names, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what this is going to be like, and then we'll see what actually happens. I have Yousef Mousavi and Kim Barlow and Ross Burns and Samantha Wilson and Dilshan Weerasinghe here. And what this session is essentially about is about talking about and hopefully playing some guitar, and about the guitar and about improvised music and about how the guitar figures in these various artists' musicianship, and specifically how it relates to their approaches to improvisation. For those of you who might not have caught this factoid, 2020 was the year where the most guitars were sold in the history of guitars being sold. I think that speaks to many things, but it's a verifiable statistic that has had real influence in the world of guitars being made and getting out into the world and people learning how to play guitar. With that as a backdrop to perhaps why this is going this way with all the same instrument, the other thing that I'll just mention is that Upstream has a history of trying to do single instrument events from time to time, including Tim Brady's Halifax Upstream Guitar Orchestra, a number of years ago, and we've done large saxophone ensembles, and I thought it was time to revisit the guitars again. So I'll just start with a little introduction. My name's Lukas Pearse, as I said before, and I started playing guitar when I was about 13, although I am professionally a bassist. I am one of the people who switched from guitar to bass because I knew so many great guitarists, and I didn't know really any bass players. So I thought, well, I can probably do that. Although I've kept up my own affection and collection of guitars, as for a discussion before. So I have a little guitar with me here that may or may not get played in the course of this, but a tiny little Framus guitar from the 1960s. Anyway, I'll just next. I'm going to go in the order that we see here, and beside me here is Yousef Mousavi, and perhaps you can say something about yourself, who you are as a musician, and what you think about the guitar.
Yeah, so again, my name's Yousef. When did I start playing the guitar? Maybe like I was 11 or something. Yeah, I'm a composer, guitarist. I play in a band with Lukas, Open Borders, as well as a few other bands. Sometimes I work in the video games industry. Yeah, my relationship with the guitar pretty much just started out as a gateway to get into punk music. And as for improvisation, it took me a very long time to realize I was actually an improviser. Maybe recently I figured that out.
I think we can have more questions about that soon as we go, about how people came to improvisation. Kim Barlow, you have a guitar.
I have a guitar. I studied classical guitar when I was a kid. I started when I was 10. And And then when I finished my bachelor's degree, I started playing the banjo. So for the last 20 years, really, I've focused more on the banjo. And I think it was partly because I liked that it took away, two strings essentially and made my life a lot simpler. And so I just recently I've been coming back to the nylon strings. I guess during the lockdown back in March, I started playing those old classical pieces again, um, and have just more recently been working improvisation back into my playing. I toured as a singer songwriter for years, and I often toured with a guitarist named Justin Haynes, and he we started improvising on stage in between songs. Every once in a while, we would just throw in a little moment, and um, those moments were so intense and magical because it made you stop thinking about the audience and stop thinking about what song you're going to play next and just listen. And that felt really important. And Justin passed away a couple of years ago, and I think that I'm trying to just remember what I learned from him, and so bringing this music back into the center of things.
Thanks. I mean, there's even more questions there, especially about the banjo. I'm going to come back to. Ross Burns.
Greetings, everybody. Very nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Likewise, a guitarist, just like Lukas. I think I was 13 when I started the guitar, which seems like a very fruitful age. That's when I started being interested in a number of things that I'm still doing. But guitar first among them, maybe. And I owe a lot of credit, especially when I think about that time, to my teacher Ross Anderson, who is a great Halifax guitarist. That if you do know Ross and have seen him play, then you know what I'm talking about. So certainly, it was experience, having a regular relationship with Ross, playing a lot of guitar in those lessons, and really unlocking the instrument as an instrument of just fun and also creativity. Those lessons would often be just, all right, let's just play, as opposed to, all right, here's 6 things we need to cram into your head information wise. So it was maybe first with Ross that I realized I was an improviser, because we would just sit down and play together. Credit to Ross Anderson. I'm excited about this conversation. Lukas was giving us a little primer before we got online, and I thought to myself, oh man, I'm looking forward to hearing this, let alone participating in it. So all sorts of stuff that's near and dear to my heart, both just the instruments and the particular challenges of the instrument and the joys of the instrument, and also improvisation, which I think is central to everybody's life, not just musicians. It's a very a basic human need. It's not even it's not an option. It's a necessity in everyday life, if you're just walking down the street or if you're on stage at the Open Waters Festival. So anyway, thanks again for having me, Lukas.
Thanks, Ross. And over here on my lower left, Samantha Wilson.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, just who are you?
Okay, yeah. So I guess I came to guitar when I was younger. My stepbrother played classic rock in his bedroom, and I would just like creepily listen to him practicing, and I was like, I want to learn how to play guitar. And it took 2 years to convince my parents to let me borrow a guitar. They didn't think I was serious, and here I am, 15 years later, still playing. And yeah, I grew up in a big family and spent a lot of time alone because I was the only girl. So yeah, it just kind of became this like safe haven, which it still is. Yeah. I don't know what else to say, so I'll let the next person go.
Thanks. And Dilshan.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Dilshan. I started playing guitar as well at 13. It sounds like that's a common age for a lot of folks. Though I've been playing music specifically, I've been playing predominantly piano and violin for years before that, till I came to the guitar around 13. Though for like a few years leading up to that, I had this, I guess, obsessive appreciation for guitar. Like I remember drawing them all the time in my binder, and like listening to anything with guitar in it, which is like I wanted to know every solo. I wanted to know every fact about every guitarist. And I remember when my older brother started playing guitar, he played an acoustic guitar, and like I remember he would just leave it lying around the house, and I would just like look at it, and it was like the coolest thing in the world. And he would take lessons at the folklore center here in Halifax, and I would tag along just so like this fleeting moment of like looking at the guitars in the shop or like hearing something through the walls, even if I didn't play guitar, like I was just a huge fan of it. So then I finally got one when I was 13. I started taking lessons, and yeah, here we are.
So thanks, folks. So I'm going to kind of just open this up, and again to the to any listeners, audiences out there, a reminder that that we will be certainly taking questions in the either the chat or the comments section, and I will certainly relay them to everybody. So please feel free to ask questions. I do think that it's going to be useful for us to try to see what happens when guitars get played in the Zoom environment. There's lots more we could say and lots more we could talk about, but let's just try seeing what a little bit of guitar sounds like in this situation. It's a situation that we're all kind of uncomfortable with in some weird way. So perhaps let's unmute ourselves and try to see if we can just do a little bit of a little bit of playing, perhaps sequentially. Maybe we'll try to just go maybe in the reverse order than we introduced ourselves, just to shake things up. So that would be starting at the bottom, right to left. From my screen. I don't know how you have your screens, but I'm looking. Does that make sense to people? No.
Yes.
Okay. Dilshan's 1, Samantha's 2, Ross is 3, Kim's 4, Yousef's 5. I'll be last. And just I want to hear what the guitars that we have with us sound like. And I'm just talking improvising can be whatever you need it to be at this point. I have no particular expectation.
That's me first, yeah?
Yeah, just play a little bit. Cool. And whatever a little bit means to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amen.
So
I'd say it's really nice to see you playing guitar.
that's probably the first time I've played guitar in front of anybody in a decade or more. Which, other than my kids, although that's not even what I would play. But yeah, so I guess it's great to hear people's kind of guitar voices in this sense. I'd like to know what you think your experience is and has been about playing guitar online, playing guitar on Zoom. What's this all about? I'm gonna kind of just mix up who I kind of throw the starting position too, and we'll try to keep it going in different directions, just to keep you on your toes. Samantha, what do you think it's like playing guitar online on Zoom? You met your internet connection earlier. How does that factor into it?
Yeah, there's sometimes a lag, um, and where you have those like, or even just now, I noticed that electric guitars are more watery, like maybe because of the overtones or the amp and the distance from the amp to the computer. Um, and I've been teaching online, so I've been actually using my classical more, um, because I think it's a pure, not pure sound, but like picked up a little bit better, um, in my experience. Yeah. Uh, but yeah, playing quickly, it's almost like the internet isn't strong enough to like get all the things. So it's kind of like this blah, 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 collage of delays. So yeah, I've just been playing or trying to play slower and more spacious on Zoom.
That's really interesting how the medium affects the art. Um, Yousef, what's your experience of the Zoom environment, or just the online world of guitaring?
So I've been teaching for, I guess it's basically since the lockdowns began online, and it's been mostly positive. I think we were talking about this the other day at a practice, that there's something about the sort of like where the guitar lives in the frequency spectrum that allows it to be a bit better for online than some instruments. I know a lot of my vocal teacher friends have been complaining about like intonation issues and stuff because of probably like compression and stuff like that. Um, it's funny because I'm in a group called Tournament Arc. We do like video game covers, and we're all from different places in the world. And so I've been playing online in a sense because we record that way for like a handful of years now. Yeah, it's very different, and I definitely agree with Sam that classical. There's something about acoustic and classical that just sings far better than an electric does. Yeah.
Well, let's let the electric guitar players in the chat room respond. Dilshan, what do you think?
So my experience with it thus far has been predominantly through teaching. And I found that I've also tended to gravitate much more towards acoustic or nylon string than electric when I'm teaching, due to not even really thinking about a difference in sound itself. Because when I'm in the room with just me, I have no idea what it sounds like to whoever is listening. I tended to gravitate more towards the acoustic just for a sort of, I guess, sake of practicality of, okay, I know this is simpler. I can kind of trust the sound more. Whereas with the electric, I find there's more moving parts, and factoring in Zoom's like, okay, here's the guitar, here's the chord. Okay, how does that affect the sound? Okay, here's the amp, and the amp's this far back, and the webcam is here, and the audio quality is this. So with an acoustic, I find teaching wise, there's less factors involved in terms of like, just here's the sound is here, it's the distance is this far. So suddenly kind of taking out some of those factors is why I've been leaning towards acoustic when it comes to teaching online, simply because of that, the simplicity of this is how it sounds, and it's a much more trusted, I guess, in this environment, since there's less room for the sound to change.
And Kim, do you think that's does your nylon string agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just realizing as you're all saying this stuff that that's why I've been playing the nylon string guitar, because it sounds better on the computer. And it's not necessarily about Zoom, I think, just the going online and even making a pre-recorded video. People are going to be listening to it on their laptops or their phones, and it's just going to translate a little better. the power of the majesty of my amp is not going to transfer itself to your shitty computer speakers. So I think that's why I've been playing this more. And luckily in Canning we've been doing a lot of live stuff for the past bunch of months, so I haven't had to use Zoom very much, but I see it in my future.
And Ross, what's the Zoom environment in your intersection with you?
Yeah, my experience has involved very little playing guitar in this medium. Just a lot more creative meetings and conversations, and meetings with teachers and communities, bands and things. And when I started meeting with teachers, collaborators, communities in this space, very quickly it became pretty obvious that it wasn't going to be great for playing music, like trying to do your thing, fit it into this tiny receiver, and then have it broadcast to the other end in a successful kind of way. So I've got relatively little experience of actually like playing in this kind of context, but maybe some of the audio stuff about that everyone's talking about. One idea that pops into my head is that this technology is so geared towards the voice, the human voice, that I think that anything timbrally that comes closer to that, and the classical guitar has a kind of a vocal quality, and also it's the source is right here, like people have been saying, instead of being across the room. So I think that probably definitely does lend itself better to this format. But I've had a lot of fun both with New Hermitage, the band that I play in. We've been getting together, especially during the thick of the lockdown. We were getting together and not playing together, but just talking about what we needed or could do in the future. And the thing it has unlocked for me was, in fact, just recording things and sending them to one another, as a more, that felt like a more productive use of the technology, so that we weren't, craning our necks to hear, are you coming through? Are you playing? Did you stop? What's happening? So some more kind of collage collaborations where someone would send a solo piece or the germ of an idea, and then people would collaborate in their own time, and then we would largely the great Andrew McKelvey would knit it all together and create some collage art out of the pieces that we were sending together. So for me, it's been this format has been much more about friendship and community than about actually literally playing music.
Well, on that, I think that's a great point to take a little bit of a detour from, because if these technologies are imperfect, let's maybe move back to the perfection or imperfection of the guitar itself, and what is the guitar. And I guess really the question that I want to explore with you all is, what does the guitar offer in your experiences as a vehicle for improvisation? Is there something about it that's different than other instruments? Is there something that's the same? What's it like to improvise on the guitar? I think for anybody who's not played a guitar, or maybe people who have played guitar and are not improvisers, or I think there's a lot of different angles on this. I'm just curious to hear about what the guitar's part in your position as an improviser might be. Who wants to take that? Anybody want any takers, or shall I assign it? Okay, Ross.
I can just say something quickly that pops to mind and then pass the mic. But I think that a lot of us approach the guitar, and I see this happening with students of mine and other guitarists, is that you approach it, you learn things in a very guitaristic kind of a way, which I don't know if, I think that rings pretty, or that has a strong influence on how we approach the instrument as a beginner, as a learner.
Guitar mean for someone who doesn't play guitar? What is it? Can you tell them?
So like, just as opposed to learning, learning in a very guitar specific way. So even just thinking about shapes on the instrument and learning learning things that feel at the beginning like they're completely isolated, discrete to the guitar. Like when I learned to play a chord, I didn't, it took me, like it was maybe a decade later that I realized that this related to a piano or a music theory or something more universal. I learned guitar in a really guitar specific way. So I thought that everything was a really discrete guitar shape and pattern. And so that was both a tool. I think it got me quickly playing music, but it also maybe was a bit of got in the way of realizing that this is actually a universal instrument. It's not, you don't have to only, strum 6 strings at a time and play this instrument in the way that it's been played. So, I think it makes that learning experience, very guitar specific learning experience, I think is something that I've had to recognize and then, negotiate with, like embrace, but also sometimes try to break out of.
Dilshan, yeah, you had talked about playing other instruments. So I'm very curious to hear what you think about the guitar and improvisation.
Yeah. So if you don't mind me just going off of Ross's point initially on guitaristic things, one thing I've struggled with and still try to work with in terms of improvising with the guitar and the guitaristic nature of like shapes and boxes and being dependent on things like muscle memory is something that I struggle with on the guitar, specifically not on other instruments, in terms of like my hands want to fall into certain chord shapes, fall into certain scale patterns. And sometimes in my mind, it feels like I'm not completely improvising. I'm falling back on like, it doesn't feel like I'm telling the instrument or telling the music what to do. It feels like almost like I've been pre-programmed to kind of do particular habits, as opposed to kind of really being sort of in the moment, kind of producing something. But then there's also something to be said of, if those habits do come up in the moment, then is that so detrimental? Is that not just being in the moment and that's just what happens? The one thing I think that is unique to the guitar and is really special, regardless of the context of improvisation or not, is that there's a certain personal relationship I find that people have with the guitar that you don't see as often on instruments like the piano, for example. Like there's a certain one-to-one personal relationship you have with like your guitar, that you take your guitar to the gig or your guitar to rehearsal. You've had like a certain guitar forever, and you don't hold a piano when you're playing it. You don't hug a piano, when you're getting into a really intense solo. This isn't like a part of this isn't as close to your body. And so the way you kind of know the instrument becomes, I find, a lot more personal on the guitar than when compared to other instruments that I played, like the piano, just because of, how, again, this sort of one-to-one sort of almost personal relationship with the instrument itself.
As a bassist, a double bassist, I just want to try and measure in there. It's an interesting comparison because with the double bass, you have more like an equal partner rather than as something that you're cradling, preparing
exactly.
for.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
But I'm gonna toss it to Sam. What do you think about the guitar and improvising as the machine that it is?
I think it offers like a wide palette of choices, and you can make the same choice in different places if you're thinking about notes or sounds. So while it can be sort of limiting that it's like you're gravitated towards patterns and that muscle memory, I also think it offers like equally like a wide range of options. And for myself, I've noticed that like a lot of my improvising has been very tonal. I don't know if that's because of the instrument or because of what I listen to, but part of my own thing now is like, how can I break out of that boundary on my instrument to play a little less tonal? But I think it's just a matter of perception, really. But yeah, there's there's so many choices that, like, when I first started learning, I was like, how am I ever gonna be able to learn this. But then you also look at it like, oh, it provides you all these options, so that's really cool. Yeah, and just the way that you touch the strings, and you can think beyond the strings, like think about the body. Yeah, that's what I think about it, I guess. And it can have that like singing voice. You can change the tone. Especially if you have an electric guitar, then the options are even more expansive because there's gear and stuff to modify the sound. So, yeah, it's like endless to me.
Well, yeah, Yousef, I know that you know something about gear and modifying the sound because that's part of the discussions that we've had. What's your take on what does the guitar offer as a musician, as an improviser, and for you?
It's funny. It's almost like a metaphysical question, in a sense. Well, funnily enough, I'm not even playing through an amp. I'm playing through my computer, right? So yeah, I'm a big fan of the digital domain. Yeah, a part of me, sometimes thinks the guitar is incredibly limiting because for me, I think funnily enough, my favorite instrument might be the piano. I like that the orchestral quality of it, the fact that it can do many different things at the same time. We can do all those things, but we kind of have to make it smaller. But then another side of that is with, say, pedals, or you could even go as far as to say like editing. I mean, there's really nothing a guitar can't be. A great example of that is for years it was my dream to have something like a sustain pedal for my guitar. And that was always just kind of some crazy pipe dream. And then, in the last few years, there's been a company who's even made that. And when I think about all the possibilities that opens up, I mean, it's just, it really excites me. I'm sorry, Ross, sorry. I was just looking for your name on the, Ross, you were using a pedal during your first improvisation. What was that?
I do have, well, I've certainly enjoyed that dimension too, especially as far as breaking out of the guitaristic stuff. But I was using a pitch shifting, sort of a whammy pedal that I was altering the tone with, or altering the pitch with, as well as a reverb pedal.
Yeah, I think the guitar is inherently more diverse in that sense. Modular, maybe, is a better word. It can really kind of be anything. Yeah. I mean, and then we can get into alternate tunings, like microtonal systems. Sky's the limit. I think a big part of that too is that we directly come into contact with the strings. Like many of the most expressive instruments, like the string section of an orchestra, has just an infinite almost amount of articulations, right? I think because we directly come into contact with the string, we can do a lot of crazy stuff.
Lukas, you're muted.
Yeah.
Probably just as well. It's interesting then, if you talk about the expressive power of the orchestra and of the string section, considering that we live in a culture where guitars are kind of expected to be improvisers and violinists are not. Not that they can't be, of course they can be, but that's much less part of the expectation. Well, I think there's more questions that can come out of that in a minute. But Kim, thank you for pointing out that I was muted. It has to happen at some point during a Zoom call. And so back to the acoustic quality of things. You were talking earlier about how the current situation has brought you back to both improvising and to the nylon string guitar. What do you think the guitar offers as an improviser and to an improviser?
Well, for me, I because I've spent the last 20 years playing, 3 and 4 chord folk songs for the most part, I don't have the same motor memory that you guys have. So coming and mostly playing banjo and then coming back to the guitar, I don't know what's going to happen. So that's been kind of it's been kind of fun lately, just putting my hands down and seeing what sounds are gonna, and just the the richness of the combinations of sounds that you can get, and the resonance of six strings, and the warmth of the nylon strings. I'm just really loving all of those things right now.
This brings up a question that you came in that I'm going to start off with from before our broadcast here started, was about, you say that you've spent a lot of time playing banjo, and then you have a ukulele present in the room, and I think it's a worthwhile question to us ask about, like, what makes a guitar, and what is there a line between guitars and other string instruments?
Well, I think that the other string instruments that I play, they limit your options a little bit more, and that's kind of a relief sometimes. So, yeah, the guitar is a pain. It's a bit of a pain for me. and it's a pain that I'm ready to embrace right now, I guess. And it's fascinating to hear you say, Yousef, that you want more options, and the piano, you get to play 10 things at the same time instead of just 6, and all the, multiple combinations that opens up for you. And then adding all the other sounds as well. I think that I tend to prefer to limit my options, because improvising is, you're just constantly making decisions, so many decisions, and it's really exciting. But I think that I tend to get overwhelmed.
Well, see, I say that, but then I have enough problems with 6 strings as it is, so yeah.
Dilshan, you had talked about playing other instruments as well. What do you think about, like, the line between the guitar and other string instruments?
Interesting, because there comes a point where, in a lot of, for example, just as a random example, like fusion music, where a lot of new music, where it's almost like the point of it with all these effects is to make a guitar not sound like a guitar. So it's like, we don't need like the sound of it, but which then speaks to, like, well, then why would you use a guitar for it? Which speaks to, like, this as sort of a creative tool, as there's something about this specifically that we are drawn to, of the mechanics of the place that we start from, being 6 strings, a neck positioned in a certain way, a body in a certain way. But then the sound that comes out of it, we don't necessarily want it to just sound like we want to have a bit more of a not guitar sound. So listening to, again, as a random example, like heavy jazz fusion groups, there's so many times where, like, you can't tell guitars are guitars, which is kind of cool, but it does speak to, I guess the guitar has this ability to disguise itself in certain ways, and then be sort of used in different contexts in such a fashion. Compare that to, let's say, an upright piano. Like, you hear an upright piano, it's a piano, and specifically not talking about electric, like a Rhodes sound or something like that, but the point of, like, a grand piano is, say, like, you're improvising still, but you have the sound of a piano still. And so then the limitations that come with that, the game that has to be played with that, is that you have a different starting point, but you're the end point of that, the sound that's going to come up, is a bit closer to that. Whereas with the guitar, you don't necessarily have that. You can have this as a particular start point, but the sound you actually end up with can be very non-guitar-like and very sort of chameleon-esque, and can fit into a lot of different settings. Hope that answers the question. I'm not sure if
it does. I'm thinking about, like, with other string instruments and such too.
Oh, yes.
Do you still play violin?
Yeah, well, I haven't picked it up in several. I think the last time I picked up a violin was 3 years ago, and so that came initially. I think, again, there first was sort of a difference of position, where I think, again, this idea of, like, when you finish playing something on the violin, like put it down, or whereas a guitar, like I can see everyone kind of doing it now. Even when you're not playing, you're kind of like you hug your instrument. It's like this is a part of you. Whereas like if I'm playing piano, as another example, or playing violin, if every time I finish playing, I'm on the piano, like this, people will be like, damn, he's fucking weird. Like doesn't make any sense. Whereas a guitar, this is a perfectly normal thing to do, right? So it comes back to, again, a certain personal one-to-one relationship I found with the guitar, even with when people will say, oh, I took my violin to the gig, I was rehearsing with my violin. You know, the relationship we have with it in terms of how we hold it, how we play it, I found personally was different. And it also came to a point for me in that a lot of the music I was listening to wasn't violin music. It was predominantly music that was centered around the guitar. So in terms of approach, suddenly I found a much sort of an opportunity to have a bit more of a sense of self playing the guitar than other stringed instruments, since I could play things that felt like they were much, much closer to me and much more a part of me. And which then in turn kind of started to affect sort of expression and technique as well, even like how much I'd want to sort of give in to something, how much I could let loose on something. Whereas with the violin, it was a bit more limiting, I found, for me personally, though, because again, I tended to gravitate much more towards guitar sounding things.
Sam, you had talked at the beginning in your introduction about waiting, perhaps patiently, perhaps impatiently, to get access to a guitar. Do you have a relationship with other instruments as well as the guitar as well, or what do you think about the boundaries between the guitar and the other instruments that are not the guitar, or have you just stuck with that one that you waited for?
I do play a little bit of piano, but I definitely have a way more personal relationship with the guitar. And I have never been able to sell any of my guitars. It's like having children. Whereas my keyboard, I feel like if I needed the money, I could sell it and I'd be fine. Yeah, there's something, I just spend more time with it, and I think that's why it's more personal to me. I also love how you can transport it with you wherever you go. A little harder to do with the keyboard. Yeah, I don't know if that totally answers the question, but yeah, I guess my ear has been, like Yousef was saying, I went through a period where I was like, the piano's my favorite instrument. Like, why am I playing the guitar? And then I put it down for a little while, and then I really missed it, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't know, just connected to this instrument for some reason.
If I could,
Rob, I've seen you play banjo as well. What do you think about this relationship with the guitar as the tool itself, and when is the guitar not the guitar? What other instruments are there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it comes down to your approach to it. Like I would say that you can play, like for instance, when I play the ukulele, I'm actually playing guitar on the ukulele, because the ukulele has a whole tradition and a technique that I haven't engaged with in the same way. But because there's enough similarities structurally, I can play the ukulele like a guitar. I've been really loving playing my 5-string banjo. And I predominantly, as a 5-string, play it in like an Appalachian, like frailing style. But I also enjoy taking off the 5th string and tuning the 4 strings like a guitar. And in that case, I'm playing the banjo, but I'm actually playing guitar. You know, it feels to me like that question is a little bit about your approach and less about the instrument. Like I could play the bass guitaristically, or so when the instruments share enough structural things in common, I think that you can really bring, if you're a guitarist and you have this rich experience as a guitarist, you can bring that to the banjo. You can really bring that to another instrument. In some cases, I mean, just like anything, I think it cuts both ways. Like it could unlock interesting things on the instrument, and it could like if I played in a band as the bass player real guitaristically, I might get fired for not doing the thing that someone was hoping I would do. But I think that the like guitar is an instrument, obviously, but it's, I think in another way, guitar is an approach, and it's a language and a set of instincts and habits that are cultivated by the guitar. And so you could, like, I've seen, for instance, like a saxophone player playing a guitar solo just because of the, you know, the like the language, the ferocity, or the, you know, or the literally the materials that they're bringing to it. So there's a way in which, in an abstract way, guitar is just an approach that comes from the instrument. It's not just literally the instrument only.
I think that's fascinating how instruments can set up kind of musical languages for better and for worse. You know, as a bass player who also plays guitar, I recognize when something has been written on guitar. And just this happened the other day, Yousef, in rehearsal, not with Yousef, but with another composer showing me something that works very well on guitar. And then I was trying to play it on bass, and it becomes rather challenging, even though it probably should theoretically work, because there's other physical considerations. We have some interesting comments here in our comment section about saying that you know, it's possible to have Andrew McKelvey saying, when I play the clarinet, folks say I sound like a saxophonist playing the clarinet, which is like, yeah, that's what he says. And it's interesting how instruments have their own grammar, their own semantics and such. And yet, that being the case, I also know, because of having the privileged position of having heard all of you play, you also all have different languages and semantics and grammars that you all bring with you as guitarists, that you all have your own identity as guitarists, and that's not just intrinsic to the instrument either. It's not just like you're just filling the role of, here's somebody who's playing the thing, that there's actually other options there as well. We're coming closer to our point here. I do want to try to see if we can try to maybe play a little bit of guitar, even if it goes into something that is not what we thought it would be because of the Zoom world. I think that still might be amusing, if not, we'll see about its artistic merit. That's left to be decided. But there is also I think a very apropos comment where Maureen Batt says that I really love this idea that because we have to slow down to accommodate the medium and the technology, that we also end up taking more time to be with the community, and we end up having to listen more all around. And I think that's very insightful. We've all had to do that today, just to each take our turns in speaking, which is quite different than it would be if we were speaking in the same room. And I think it's a sentiment held by many, is we hope that this is one of the, hope that this effect lasts beyond the pandemic Zoom times, this idea of taking time to listen to one another. We also have a comment from the Reverb branch that says, it took me a long time to sound like a ukulele player coming from a guitar background. Not sure I'm there yet. Yeah, the ukulele has its own languages, and I can say from the bass club that the bassists talk about guitarists who play bass like a guitarist, and we all kind of know what that means. That even the bass guitar, and I don't have one here, but I do play the bass guitar as well as the double bass and the guitar, that these things have their own grammars and their own logics. And even the double bassists will say, that's somebody who plays double bass like a bass guitar, because those things don't totally align.
Lukas, I just wanted to, it occurs to me that it feels important to recognize not just that the instrument sets that semantics, but the ancestors of the lineage that you're part of. Like, it's because guitarists who are our heroes and our influences and our predecessors on the instrument, who have set the way and shown us what's possible. It's because they made certain choices and had certain sounds and had certain, expressions on the instrument. that we play a certain way, like, so that's why, like a searing guitar solo has a certain, it has a certain sound. It's not just the instrument, but it's our precedents, the musicians who we rely on as influences, and our predecessors on the instrument who actually, like shape that. It's a parallel universe where the guitar has a totally different character because it has totally different human, like there's a different ancestry as players.
How about we keep that previous ancestry in mind in our last few minutes available here, and because this will perhaps be a message to those descendants of us all about what the guitar happens to be, but perhaps it could be something else if we play the right notes or play the wrong notes. So coming up on the end here, I just want to thank you all for being here, and then we're going to play. We're going to play our way out, and then it'll stop. So thank you, Dilshan. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Yousef. Stick around in the Open Waters Festival. There is another week's worth of music, an event, or mostly an event per day, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. And the one that will be most closest to where we are now of us here is I will be playing with Yousef Mousavi on Monday evening at 7:30, and Kim will be playing broadcasting from Wolfville on Friday evening. So these are all things that we can look forward to. So let's see if we can prove how the Zoom works or doesn't work.
Thank you, Lucas.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Lucas.
Thank you.
I think we should try to play together and prove how the Zoom doesn't work. We've
Uh-huh.
had our chance to take time one at a time. So let's go to any digital archaeologists that we had temporal limitations. Thanks everybody for being here. And hopefully all of you, I will be able to in a position to present each and every one of you in upcoming events that Upstream Music Association will be putting on. So folks out there in homeland, please keep your ears and eyes peeled for Dilshan Weerasinghe, Samantha Wilson, Ross Burns, Kim Barlow, and Yousef Mousavi in various other combinations, some of which will be presented by Upstream, and others will get to them first, no doubt, as well. So thank you all for this this fascinating experience.
Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
we'll be in touch.
Super fun.
Yeah.
Bye.